Admiral Zeftar of the Hegemony Third Fleet was enjoying his morning nutrition cycle when the impossible appeared on his sensors. The Cathari commander had served for over 2 centuries, witnessed the rise and fall of 3 minor civilizations, and personally overseen the pacification of 12 rebellious worlds. Nothing surprised him anymore. Until today. Admiral, his sensor operator's voice carried an edge that made Zeftar's primary heart skip. We're detecting massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Something's coming out of hyperspace. Zeftar set down his nutrition pod and moved to the central command platform. The holographic display showed the peaceful mining colonies of Kepler 442, one of the hegemony's most productive resource extraction sites. 3 billion Cathari, Velnari, and Thex workers lived on the 5 terrestrial planets, feeding the Council's ever-growing appetite for rare minerals. How massive? Zeftar asked, though something cold was already forming in his stomach. 16 distinct signatures, sir. Each one is reading as a dreadnought-class vessel or larger. The bridge fell silent. 16 dreadnoughts represented more firepower than most sector fleets. Only the Council's elite core worlds possessed such vessels, and none were scheduled for deployment to this quiet mining system. IFF codes? Unknown signatures, sir? The computer doesn't recognize them at all. Zeftar felt his secondary heart stop entirely. In 300 years of Galactic Council dominance, every ship, every fighter, every orbital platform had been cataloged and registered. There were no unknown signatures anymore. There couldn't be. Open a channel to Hegemony Command. Maximum priority encryption. Before his communications officer could comply, space itself seemed to tear open at the system's edge. 16 massive shapes emerged from hyperspace with a coordinated precision that spoke of decades of practice. Zeftar stared at the readings in growing horror. Each vessel was over 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapon signatures his computer couldn't identify. Their hulls were midnight black, seeming to absorb the system's star rather than reflect it. No running lights, no identification markers, nothing but pure, predatory darkness sliding through space like sharks sensing blood. Sir, his tactical officer whispered, those aren't any design in our databases. The hull composition, the energy signatures, even the way they move through space, it's completely unknown technology. Zeftar's mind raced through possibilities. Rogue AI constructs from the dead machine worlds? No, the movement patterns were too organic, too intuitive. A previously unknown species from beyond the galactic rim? Possible, but the timing was too convenient, too targeted. Then the lead vessel began broadcasting. The signal came through on every frequency simultaneously, cutting through communications protocols like they didn't exist. When the image resolved on the main screen, Zeftar felt something he hadn't experienced in over a century. Pure, primal fear. The figure on the screen was humanoid, but wrong somehow. Pale skin stretched over sharp features, eyes the color of Arctic ice that seemed to look directly through the display at him. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made the bridge atmosphere itself vibrate. Greetings, children of the Galactic Council. The words were spoken in perfect galactic standard, but underneath them was something else. Something that made Zeftar's translator implant struggle and spark. The creature smiled, revealing teeth too white and too sharp. You may not recognize us, but we know you very well. We know every one of your worlds, every one of your fleets, every one of your leaders. We've been watching you for a very long time. Zeftar found his voice. This is Admiral Zeftar of the Hegemony Third Fleet. Identify yourselves immediately or face the consequences. The creature's smile widened. How deliciously predictable. Always the same demands, always the same threats. Your kind never did learn proper manners. It leaned forward, and for a moment Zeftar could swear he smelled something like ozone and burning metal through the screen. We are the children of Earth. We are humanity returned. And we've come to collect what you owe us. The word Earth hit the bridge like a physical blow. Several officers stepped back from their stations. One of the junior technicians made a sound like a strangled prayer. Impossible, Zeftar breathed. Humanity was purged 3 centuries ago. The Sol system was sterilized. We made sure, you made sure of nothing. The human's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any war cry. You killed our home world. You murdered our civilians. You hunted our ships across 100 systems. You declared us extinct. The pale eyes seemed to glow with their own light. But you didn't kill all of us, Admiral. You didn't even kill most of us. Behind the human, more figures moved in the shadows of their ship's bridge. Zeftar caught glimpses of technology that hurt to look at directly, of weapons that seemed to bend light around them, of displays showing tactical information that his brain refused to process. "What do you want?" Zeftar managed. "Justice," the human said simply. "Reparations. An accounting for 300 years of celebrating our genocide." It gestured to something off-screen, and new contacts began appearing throughout the Kepler 442 system. Hundreds of them. Thousands. But first, we want to remind the galaxy what humans are truly capable of when we stop playing by your rules. The communications channel closed, leaving Zeftar staring at a tactical display that defied belief. The human ships had deployed with impossible speed, surrounding every planet, every orbital station. They hadn't fired a shot, but they didn't need to. The message was clear. "We own this system now." "Sir," his communications officer said shakily, "I'm receiving surrender requests from everyone. Every station, every planetary governor, every mining supervisor, they're all asking permission to surrender." Zeftar looked at his sensor readings again. Each of those dark ships was radiating more energy than his entire fleet combined. Whatever weapons they carried, whatever technology they developed in their 3 centuries of exile, it was so far beyond anything in the Council's arsenal that resistance would be suicide. "Open a channel to the planetary governments," he said finally. Tell them to comply with whatever the humans demand. And us, sir?" Zeftar stared at the lead human vessel, remembering stories his grandfather had told him about the old days, before the Council's victory. Stories about human tactics that violated every civilized rule of warfare. About human soldiers who kept fighting long after they should have died. About human fleets that appeared where they couldn't possibly be, struck where they couldn't possibly strike, and vanished before retaliation could arrive. The stories had always ended with the reminder that humanity was gone, that such chaos and unpredictability would never threaten the galaxy again. Looking at his tactical display now, Zeftar realized the galaxy had been living on borrowed time. "Set course for Hegemony Command, maximum speed," he ordered. Someone needs to warn the Council that their greatest nightmare just became reality. As the Third Fleet jumped into hyperspace, leaving the Kepler 442 system, to humanity's tender mercies, Zeftar couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing the end of everything the Galactic Council had built. 3 hours later, the system's mining platforms began exploding, but not from weapons fire. The humans were simply taking them apart, dismantling 3 centuries of infrastructure with the same methodical precision they'd once used to explore the galaxy. Massive salvage vessels appeared from nowhere, collecting every scrap of metal, every processing unit, every life support system. They weren't destroying the Council's assets, they were harvesting them. And on every planet in the system, the human ships began broadcasting the same message in every language. "Citizens of the Galactic Council, you have been liberated from oppression. Report to designated collection points for processing and relocation. Resistance will be met with immediate correction. Compliance will be rewarded with continued existence. Welcome to humanity's new galactic order." The galaxy's 300 years of peace had just come to an end. Admiral Zeftar's warning would reach Hegemony Command in 6 days. By then, 17 more systems would experience humanity's particular brand of liberation. The children of Earth had indeed returned. And this time, they weren't asking for anything. High Counselor Vexthany had ruled the Galactic Council for over 4 centuries, presiding over the greatest period of peace and prosperity in galactic history. The crystalline Velnari stood 3 meters tall in his ceremonial chamber, his translucent body refracting the light of 1,000 worlds that paid tribute to Council authority. Around him, representatives of the galaxy's dominant species maintained the respectful silence befitting his position. When Admiral Zeftar's emergency transmission arrived, Vexthany was mediating a minor trade dispute between the Cathari hegemony and the Thex Commercial Collective, the sort of mundane administrative task that had defined galactic politics for 3 centuries. Impossible. Vexthany's voice resonated through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. Replay the message. The holographic recording flickered to life again, showing Admiral Zeftar's terrified face as he delivered his impossible report. Behind him, his ship's bridge crew worked with the desperate efficiency of beings fleeing for their lives. "High Counselor," Zeftar's recorded voice cracked with strain, "the Kepler 442 system has fallen to unknown hostiles. They claim to be human." A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembled representatives. Counselor Hrextan of the Cathari delegation activated his speaking crystal. With respect to Admiral Zeftar's distinguished service record, stress can cause even experienced officers to suffer hallucinations. Perhaps a medical evaluation. Silence. Vexthani's command froze every being in the chamber. Continue the message? Zeftar's image flickered as his ship's power fluctuated. They possessed technology beyond our current understanding. Their vessels number in the thousands. Their weapons signatures don't match anything in our databases, and their tactical coordination suggests centuries of military development. The Admiral's voice dropped to a whisper. High Counselor, they're systematically dismantling our infrastructure, not destroying it, harvesting it. And they're broadcasting claims about genocide, about extinction events, about Earth. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted denials, accusations, demands for explanations. Some of the younger delegates had never even heard of Earth outside of historical archives. To them, humanity was a mythological cautionary tale, no more real than ancient dragons or fictional demons. Vexthani extended his crystalline arms, and the chamber's harmonic field responded by producing a note so pure and commanding that every voice fell silent. Counselor Rex Tan, he said calmly, access the historical archives. Project the records of the Soul Pacification Campaign. The central hologram shimmered and displayed star charts from 3 centuries past. The Sol system appeared in perfect detail, complete with tactical overlays showing the positions of Council fleets during humanity's final extermination. As you can see, Herexton began, his confidence returning, the human elimination protocol was carried out with perfect precision. Every planet sterilized, every orbital habitat destroyed, every fleeing vessel hunted down and eliminated. The Velinari monitoring stations recorded the death of every human life sign in the system. Every life sign in the system, Vexthani repeated thoughtfully. Exactly. The species was completely... Herexten stopped, his 4 eyes widening as the implication hit him. Counselor Yilnara of the Aquatic Federation activated her translation sphere from within her mobility tank. The monitoring stations only covered the Sol system itself. The historical records show that humans had established deep space colonies, generation ships, research stations beyond the system's edge, all of which were hunted down and destroyed, Herex Tan insisted, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Vexthani turned to the chamber's data management system. Display the complete records of post-pacification operations. The hologram shifted to show a detailed timeline. For 50 years following the Sol system's sterilization, Council fleets had indeed pursued human refugees across a dozen sectors. Ship after ship had been found and destroyed. Colony after colony had been located and eliminated. But the records showed something else as well. 37 human vessels were never located, Vexthani observed. 17 colonial expeditions launched before the pacification campaign were never found. And, he paused, studying the data more carefully, the Deep Space Monitoring Network shows periodic, unexplained signals from beyond the galactic rim, signals that were classified as natural phenomena but never properly investigated. A new voice cut through the chamber's growing unease. Counselor Draktos of the Machine Collective, whose species had joined the Council only 2 centuries ago, projected his thoughts directly into the chamber's communication matrix. This unit recalls archived data from the pre-Council era. Human technological development showed exponential growth patterns unlike any other species. Their adaptation rate exceeded all predictive models. If surviving populations escaped to regions beyond Council monitoring, he didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Contact Admiral Zeftar, Vexthani commanded. Full priority channel. The communications officer worked for several minutes before shaking his head. No response, High Counselor. His ship's beacon went silent approximately 4 hours ago. The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence. Then Counselor Yilnara's tank began flashing urgent warning lights. High Counselor, her translated voice carried unprecedented alarm. I'm receiving emergency transmissions from 17 systems along the outer rim. The same pattern in each case. Unknown vessels appearing simultaneously, complete communications blackout within hours, then what? Then nothing. Complete silence from every monitoring station, every orbital platform, every defensive position. Vexthani felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Doubt about the Council's absolute power. Mobilize the 1st and 2nd Corps fleets. Establish defensive positions around the inner worlds. And, he paused, the words tasting like poison, Activate the Deep Archive protocols. Every being in the chamber recoiled. The Deep Archives hadn't been opened since the Council's formation. They contained knowledge too dangerous for general access, weapons too powerful for routine deployment, and secrets that could reshape the galaxy's balance of power. High Counselor, Harekstan's voice carried desperate hope. Surely such extreme measures aren't necessary. Even if some humans survived, they're just one species. The Council commands the loyalty of over 200 civilizations, controls the resources of 10,000 worlds, maintains the largest military force in galactic history. Before Vexthani could respond, a new transmission arrived. The signal was so powerful it overrode every communication system in the chamber simultaneously, projecting directly onto the main display without any authorization codes or security clearance. The image that appeared made several representatives cry out in fear. It was unmistakably human, but changed. Where historical records showed humans as relatively soft, their features rounded by comfort and civilization, this one looked like evolution itself had been weaponized. The face was sharp and predatory, the eyes cold as the void between stars, and the smile revealed teeth that seemed designed for ripping rather than speech. "Greetings, High Counselor Vexthani." The fact that it knew his name, knew exactly where to direct the transmission, sent ice through his crystalline structure. "I am Fleet Commander Sarah Chen, speaking for the United Terran Resistance. You may remember that name from your historical archives. We were the final human military organization to resist your genocide 3 centuries ago." Chen's image moved slightly, and behind her, other figures became visible. All human, all carrying the same predatory evolution, all watching the transmission with the focused attention of apex predators selecting their next meal. "We've been monitoring your emergency session, High Counselor. Your communication security is quaint. We wanted to address some of your concerns before you make any decisions you might regret." Vexthani found his voice. "What do you want?" "Justice," Chen said simply. "For 300 years, you've celebrated our extinction. You've taught your children that humans were too dangerous to exist. You've built monuments to commemorate our genocide." Her smile never wavered, but her eyes seemed to burn with their own light. "We want you to understand exactly how right you were." The transmission shifted to show tactical displays that made the chamber's military representatives step back in shock. Star systems throughout the Outer Rim were marked in red, each one showing the same pattern: massive human fleets, orbital infrastructure being systematically harvested, populations being relocated with ruthless efficiency. 23 systems have already been liberated from Council oppression, Chen continued. "In each case, we followed the same protocol you used on Earth. Complete sterilization of military assets, systematic resource extraction, population relocation to designated areas." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "The only difference is that we're not murdering civilians. We're simply redistributing them." "What does that mean?" Vexthani demanded. "It means that every being in those 23 systems is now working for humanity's benefit instead of the Council's. Mining operations continue under new management. Agricultural production feeds our fleets instead of your worlds. Industrial facilities manufacture human equipment using Council resources and Council labor." The tactical display zoomed out, showing the affected systems in relation to the galaxy's major population centers. Even the least militarily minded representative could see the pattern. Humanity was systematically cutting the Council off from its resource bases, using the galaxy's own infrastructure to fuel their advance. "This is slavery," Councilor Hextan accused. Chen's laugh was like breaking glass. "Slavery implies ownership. We don't own these populations, Counselor. We're simply giving them the same choice you gave humanity 3 centuries ago. Work for us, or die." She gestured, and the transmission showed footage from one of the conquered systems. Millions of beings, Cathari, Velnari, Thex, and dozens of other species labored in massive industrial complexes under human supervision. The conditions weren't brutal, but they were clearly controlled with absolute precision. Unlike your genocide of Earth, we're offering a path to survival. Compliance ensures continued existence. Productivity earns improved conditions. Resistance. The display showed the remains of a planetary defense station, twisted metal that had clearly been destroyed by weapons beyond Council understanding. Resistance is corrected permanently. "You cannot hope to match the Council's full military might," Vexthani said, but his voice carried less conviction than he'd intended. "Can't we?" Chen's smile widened. 3 centuries ago, you faced humans who were constrained by morality, limited by ethics, burdened by the desire to coexist peacefully. The humans you destroyed were explorers and diplomats and scientists who wanted to be your friends. The image behind her shifted again, showing human soldiers in armor that seemed to absorb light itself, carrying weapons that distorted space around them. "We," Chen said softly, "are not those humans." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. Finally, Vexthani spoke. "Activate the deep archives immediately. Mobilize every fleet, every defense force, every military asset in council space." His crystalline form seemed to dim with the weight of what he was ordering. "And send emergency communications to every member species. Tell them that the war of extinction has begun again." "But how many humans could there possibly be?" Counselor Hexton asked desperately. Vexthani studied the tactical displays showing 23 fallen systems, thinking about generation ships that had vanished beyond the galactic rim, about exponential population growth over 3 centuries, about a species that had apparently spent those centuries preparing for exactly this moment. "Enough," he said finally. "More than enough." Outside the council chambers, across the galaxy's communication networks, a single message began propagating to every world, every station, every vessel under council control. Emergency Protocol 7 is now in effect. All civilian populations report to designated protective zones immediately. All military assets advance to predetermined defense positions. All industrial facilities convert to wartime production standards. The Galactic Council is now under siege. For the first time in 300 years, the galaxy was at war. And this time humanity wasn't asking for peace. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been dead for 300 years, but she remembered dying as if it had happened yesterday. The memory was crystalline clear. The council bombardment of Luna Base, the atmospheric breach, the desperate final transmission to the generation ships fleeing into deep space. She remembered the cold kiss of vacuum, the burning in her lungs, the absolute certainty that humanity's future had just been murdered alongside its past. Then she had awakened in this new body, in this new age, with her consciousness intact but everything else transformed. The woman who looked back at her from the polished metal wall of her laboratory was recognizably human but clearly evolved. Her features were sharper, her muscles denser, her nervous system enhanced by 3 centuries of genetic optimization, but the most significant changes were invisible. A distributed consciousness that could survive death and resurrection, reflexes accelerated beyond baseline human limits, and a mind capable of processing information at rates that would have seemed impossible to her original self. "Dr. Vasquez," the voice of Fleet Commander Chen echoed through the lab's communication system. "Status report on Project Reckoning." Elena turned from her reflection to the massive construction bay visible through her laboratory's transparent aluminum windows. Inside, something that defied easy categorization took shape under the guided hands of thousands of human workers and converted alien laborers. It was part ship, part weapon, part industrial facility, and something else entirely that the galaxy's current understanding of physics couldn't adequately describe. 12 hours ahead of schedule, Commander," Elena replied, her voice carrying harmonics that would have been impossible with her original vocal cords. "The Cathari mining equipment integrated more smoothly than predicted, and the Velnari power distribution systems exceed our requirements by a significant margin." Through the laboratory's other windows, Elena could see the rest of humanity's growing fleet. The original 16 vessels that had announced their return to galactic civilization now numbered in the thousands, each one constructed using resources harvested from conquered council systems. But these newer ships were different from anything that had existed during the first Human Council War. They were hybrid constructions, combining human innovation with alien technology, human determination with alien resources, human creativity with alien industrial capacity. Where the original human fleet had been limited by the resources available to refugees fleeing genocide, this new generation was fed by the productive capacity of entire star systems. Dr. Elena's assistant, Marcus Webb, entered the laboratory carrying a data tablet that glowed with information. Marcus was one of the youngest members of their expedition, only 215 years old, born in the deep space colonies during humanity's exile. His modifications were more extensive than Elena's, his entire body redesigned for survival in hostile environments and enhanced combat effectiveness. "The latest reports from the Council front lines," he said, offering her the tablet. "Their response patterns are exactly as predicted." Elena accessed the data directly through her neural interface, processing battlefield information at superhuman speeds. The Council's military response to humanity's return had been swift and massive, but also fatally predictable. They were fighting the same war they'd won 3 centuries ago, using the same tactics against what they assumed was the same enemy. They were wrong on every possible level. "Show me the Proxima engagement," Elena requested. The laboratory's central hologram activated, displaying a three-dimensional battlefield map of the Proxima Centauri system where humanity's advanced elements had encountered the Council's first core fleet. By every conventional measure, it should have been humanity's defeat. 800 human vessels against over 3,000 Council ships, with the galaxy's most experienced military commanders directing operations from heavily fortified command stations. The battle had lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the entire Council fleet had been captured intact, their crews transferred to human-controlled facilities, their ships converted to serve humanity's expanding armada. Not destroyed. The distinction was important. "Their tactical adaptability remains limited," Marcus observed, manipulating the hologram to highlight specific engagement patterns. "They're still thinking in terms of traditional fleet actions, massed firepower, territorial control through military occupation." Elena nodded, studying the data flows with the enhanced pattern recognition capabilities that her modifications provided. "They're fighting a war against the species they remember." "But we're not that species anymore." She gestured, and the hologram shifted to display humanity's current operational structure. Instead of traditional military hierarchies, the human forces operated as a distributed network of autonomous units, each one capable of independent action while remaining connected to the larger strategic framework through quantum communication links that the Council couldn't intercept or jam. "Their biggest advantage during the original war was their ability to predict our behavior," Elena continued. "Human psychology, human tactics, human strategic thinking. They studied us for decades before the genocide began. Every action we took fit patterns they could anticipate and counter." She paused, accessing memories from her original death. The Council fleets had moved with impossible precision, arriving at exactly the right moment to intercept human evacuations, positioning themselves to block every escape route, timing their attacks to cause maximum psychological damage alongside military destruction. "But we're not following human behavioral patterns anymore," she said finally. "We're following patterns they created." Marcus frowned, his enhanced cognitive processes racing to follow her logic. "Explain?" Elena manipulated the hologram again, this time showing the broader strategic picture. Humanity's campaign across the Outer Rim wasn't following traditional conquest patterns. Instead of seizing territory and fortifying positions, human forces were flowing through Council space like water through a broken dam, bypassing strong points, surrounding isolated systems, cutting supply lines and communication networks before anyone realized what was happening. "Look at their response," she said, highlighting Council fleet movements. "Every time they reinforce a strategic system, we've already moved to 3 others. Every time they mass forces for a decisive engagement, we've dispersed our units beyond their ability to track. Every time they try to predict our next target, the hologram showed 17 different star systems, each one marked with Council military preparations for expected human attacks. None of them were actually under assault. Instead, humanity's forces had moved to completely different sectors, harvesting resources and converting populations while the Council's fleets waited for battles that would never come. They're fighting using their own tactical doctrines, Marcus breathed, understanding flooding through his enhanced neural networks. You've analyzed 3 centuries of their military operations and turned their own strategic thinking against them. Better than that, Elena smiled, revealing teeth that were harder than original human enamel and capable of surviving environments that would have killed her original body. We've improved their tactics. Every weakness they showed during the Genocide campaign, every blind spot their commanders developed, every assumption they made about how warfare should be conducted, we've systematized it all and created countermeasures they can't conceive of because they can't recognize their own limitations. She gestured again, and the hologram displayed the current state of the galaxy. 23 Outer Rim systems now flew human flags, their industrial output feeding the growing Terran fleet. But more importantly, the Council's response to those conquests had pulled their forces out of position throughout the galaxy, creating vulnerabilities that human strategists were already moving to exploit. Phase 2 commences in 6 hours, Elena announced. Project Reckoning will be ready? Elena looked through the windows at the massive construction taking shape in the bay. The weapon ship factory hybrid was unlike anything that had existed before, a mobile industrial base capable of converting raw stellar material directly into military assets. Where traditional fleets required extensive supply lines and resource bases, Project Reckoning could consume asteroid belts and gas giants, transforming them into weapons and ships and infrastructure with terrifying efficiency. It's ready, she confirmed. But Elena, are you certain about the target selection? The Council's core worlds have defensive capabilities that, that are designed to repel external assault, Elena interrupted. But Project Reckoning isn't an assault weapon. It's something else entirely. She activated another display, this one showing the internal structure of the galaxy's most heavily fortified system, the Velnari homeworld of Kristalla, protected by orbital defense stations that could destroy entire fleets, planetary shields that could withstand supernova-level bombardment, and military installations carved directly into the system's asteroids and moons. Traditional human tactics would involve years of siege warfare, massive fleet actions, millions of casualties on both sides. The cost would be enormous, the outcome uncertain. Elena's smile carried the cold precision of mathematics. But we're not using traditional tactics anymore. The display zoomed in on Kristalla's star, a medium-sized yellow dwarf, not unlike Earth's sun. Overlaid on the stellar diagram were schematics showing Project Reckoning's true capabilities, not ship construction or resource harvesting, but something far more fundamental. Stellar engineering, Marcus whispered, his enhanced mind immediately grasping the implications. You're going to modify the star itself. The Council believes their defensive positions make them invulnerable, Elena said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a problem perfectly solved. Orbital fortresses, planetary shields, system-wide sensor networks, all designed to repel external attack. But none of them can defend against their own star. She manipulated the display showing Project Reckoning's projected path through the Kristalla system. Instead of attacking the defenses directly, the hybrid vessel would position itself near the star and begin the delicate process of adjusting stellar output. Not enough to cause a supernova or stellar collapse, but enough to change the system's entire energy balance. A 10% increase in stellar radiation will overwhelm their planetary shields within weeks. A 15% increase will sterilize their orbital installations within days. And a 20% increase, Elena paused, letting the mathematics speak for themselves, will force complete evacuation of every inhabited body in the system, Marcus finished, without firing a single shot at their defenses. Exactly. And once the system is evacuated, we can harvest everything. Every orbital platform, every industrial facility, every defensive installation, all intact and ready for conversion to human use. Elena's smile widened. The Council will lose their most fortified system without us having to break a single shield or destroy a single fortress. Through the laboratory windows, Project Reckoning's massive bulk shifted as construction crews made final preparations for deployment. The hybrid vessel represented more than just advanced technology. It embodied 3 centuries of human adaptation, evolution, and focused rage transformed into mathematical precision. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. The psychological impact of stellar manipulation will be enormous. Every species in the galaxy will understand that humanity can literally control stars. That level of technological superiority will break their will to resist long before our fleets reach their home systems. Elena nodded, accessing tactical projections that showed cascading psychological effects rippling through Council space. Species that had fought bravely against conventional weapons would surrender immediately when faced with enemies who could weaponize the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The Council taught us that survival requires evolution, she said, watching Project Reckoning's final systems come online. They forced us to evolve beyond baseline humanity to survive their genocide, but they never considered what we might evolve into. The massive hybrid vessel began moving away from the construction bay, its multiple engines creating distortions in local space-time that made nearby asteroids drift from their orbits. Where human technology had once been limited by available resources and conventional physics, this new generation operated on principles that the original Council Wars had never imagined.
Signal Commander Chen, Elena ordered.
Project Reckoning is ready for deployment. Phase 2 of the Liberation Campaign begins now. As the communication channel opened, Elena felt the familiar satisfaction of a complex problem reaching its elegant solution. The Council had spent 3 centuries celebrating their victory over humanity, believing that they had eliminated the galaxy's most dangerous species. They were about to discover that they had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The humans returning to galactic civilization weren't the same species that had been driven to extinction 3 centuries ago. They were something new, something evolved. Something that had learned every lesson the galaxy had to teach about survival and warfare and the mathematics of power, and they were ready to share those lessons with their former oppressors. The War of Extinction was about to enter its second phase. This time, humanity would be the teachers. High Counselor Vextani's crystalline form had lost much of its luminous beauty over the past 3 weeks, Where once he had refracted light with the confidence of absolute power, now his structure seemed clouded, dimmed by the weight of reports that defied every assumption about reality itself. The Kristalla system was dying. Not from bombardment, not from invasion, not from any conventional military action that the Council's greatest minds could comprehend or counter. The system star, stable for over 4 billion years, was simply changing. Solar radiation was increasing with mathematical precision, planetary atmospheres were heating beyond habitable ranges, and the most heavily fortified system in Council space was becoming uninhabitable without a single shot being fired. "Show me the evacuation reports," Vextani commanded, his voice carrying harmonics of defeat that had never existed before. The chamber's central hologram displayed the controlled chaos of humanity's most audacious operation. 8 billion Velnari civilians were fleeing their homeworld aboard transport ships that stretched in lines from planet to hyperspace jump points. Orbital defense stations that had protected the system for centuries were being abandoned, their crews racing to escape before rising radiation levels killed them at their posts. And throughout it all, human ships watched with the patient attention of predators, allowing their prey to exhaust itself. "The stellar modification is continuing on schedule," reported Admiral Kexval, the Council's finest military strategist and Vextani's most trusted advisor. "Our Astrophysics Division estimates that radiation levels will increase another 7% within the next 48 hours. Councillor Herextan's 4 eyes were fixed on the tactical displays showing human fleet positions throughout the Kristalla system. They're not even attacking the evacuation ships, just watching, letting us flee while they harvest our infrastructure. That was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of humanity's new campaign. They weren't destroying Council assets or slaughtering populations. They were simply making Council space uninhabitable for Council species while preserving everything useful for their own purposes. It was genocide by other means, surgical, precise, and somehow more horrifying than straightforward military conquest. "High Counselor," a new voice interrupted the strategic briefing. Counselor Draktos of the Machine Collective materialized as a holographic projection, his mechanical form sparking with urgent data transmissions. "This unit has completed analysis of human technological capabilities demonstrated during the stellar modification process." Vextani turned his attention to the machine intelligence, hoping for some insight that might restore even a fragment of the Council's strategic position. "Report. The technology required to alter stellar output with such precision indicates mastery of quantum-scale stellar engineering," Draktos began, his artificial voice carrying a quality that might have been awe. "The energy manipulation systems necessary for such operations exceed our understanding by several orders of magnitude. Conservative estimates suggest that human technological advancement has continued exponentially throughout their exile period. The hologram shifted to display technical specifications that made the Chamber's military representatives step backward in unconscious fear. The energy outputs required for stellar modification were beyond anything in the Council's arsenal, beyond anything the galaxy's combined civilizations could produce, even working together." "How far beyond?" Vexani asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would shatter what remained of his confidence. "If our technological development represents linear progression over the past 3 centuries, human advancement appears to follow an exponential curve that began accelerating shortly after their exile." Draktos paused, processing calculations that stressed even his enhanced processing matrix. "Conservative projections suggest they are operating with technology approximately 1,500 years more advanced than our current capabilities." The chamber fell silent except for the soft harmonics of Velnari breathing apparatus and the distant vibrations of hyperspace engines as evacuation fleets continued fleeing the doomed Kristalla system. 1,500 years, Counselor Hexen whispered. "That's impossible. Species don't develop that rapidly. Evolution doesn't work that way. Technology doesn't advance that quickly, without vast industrial bases and multiple civilizations contributing to research. Unless..." Admiral Kexval said slowly, his tactical mind working through implications that none of them wanted to consider. They had advantages we didn't account for. "Explain," Vextani commanded. Kexval activated his personal display showing historical data from the original Human Council War. During the first conflict, human adaptability was noted as their most significant advantage. They modified tactics faster than our commanders could develop countermeasures. They adapted to new situations faster than our analysts could predict their responses. The display shifted to show genetic analysis reports from captured human specimens 3 centuries ago. But we assumed that adaptability was psychological, cultural, limited to normal biological constraints. What if we were wrong? What if human adaptability operates on a genetic level, allowing for accelerated evolution under survival pressure? The implications of his suggestion sent ripples of alarm through every being in the chamber. Accelerated evolution, guided by intelligence and driven by necessity, could potentially produce the kind of technological leaps that would explain humanity's current capabilities. "There's more," Dractos interjected, his projection flickering with the strain of processing overwhelming data streams. Analysis of captured human technology reveals integration of biological and mechanical systems at levels that suggest individual humans are now hybrid entities, part organic intelligence, part artificial enhancement, part something else entirely. He projected detailed scans of human equipment recovered from early engagements, where Council technology relied on discrete components working together. Human systems showed seamless integration between organic neural networks, quantum computational matrices, and what appeared to be technology that operated on principles the Council's science couldn't identify. "They're not using tools," Admiral Kexavold breathed, understanding flooding through his tactical consciousness. "They've become tools. Their entire species has evolved into living weapons designed for the specific purpose of defeating us." The observation hung in the air like a death sentence. For 3 centuries, the Council had celebrated the elimination of humanity while unknowingly creating the perfect enemy, a species forced to evolve beyond all normal constraints, driven by racial memory of genocide, equipped with 300 years of accumulated knowledge about Council weaknesses. "The evacuation fleets," Vextani said suddenly, his voice sharp with new understanding. "How many Council species are represented in the refugee populations?" "All of them," Admiral Kexaval replied, consulting his tactical displays. Velnari from Kristalla, Githari from the outer mining systems, Thex from the commercial centers, machine collective units from industrial platforms. He paused as the implications became clear. "Every major species in the Council has lost significant population centers to human operations. And where are those populations being relocated?" Kexavel's displays showed refugee movement patterns across the galaxy. Millions of beings were fleeing toward the Council's inner worlds, abandoning their home systems for the promise of safety behind the galaxy's most powerful defenses. "They're hurting us," Vextani said with the hollow certainty of absolute defeat. "Every operation, every system they've taken, every refugee population they've displaced, it's all been designed to concentrate our populations and resources in a smaller number of heavily defended systems. The tactical genius of humanity's strategy became apparent with horrible clarity. Instead of fighting the Council's defenses where they were strongest, the humans were forcing the entire galactic government to retreat into an increasingly small number of fortified positions. Soon the Council's remaining population would be concentrated in perhaps 50 systems instead of the thousands they had previously controlled." "Concentrated targets," Admiral Kexaval said quietly. "Easier to monitor, easier to isolate, easier to—" He didn't finish the thought. "Easier to eliminate when the time comes." Councillor Herrickstan completed, his voice carrying despair that had never existed in his species before. A new transmission arrived, cutting through the chamber's communication systems with the same effortless penetration that characterized all human technology. The image that appeared on the central display was familiar now. Fleet Commander Sarah Chen, speaking from what appeared to be the bridge of a vessel near the Kristalla system. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her, visible in the shadows of her command center, were beings that made every representative in the Council chamber recoil in horror. They had once been Velnari, Cathari, Thex, and other familiar species. But now they moved with the same predatory precision that characterized humanity's evolution, their features sharpened by modifications that enhanced their natural capabilities while adding something distinctly human to their basic psychology. "Greetings, High Counselor," Chen said, her smile carrying the warmth of genuine pleasure. "I trust you've been observing our work in the Kristalla system. We wanted to provide you with a status update before proceeding to the next phase of our liberation campaign." Vextani found his voice despite the growing horror of what he was seeing. "What have you done to them?" "Done to them?" Chen's expression showed what might have been confusion. "We've offered them the same choice we offer every population we encounter: adaptation or extinction. These individuals chose adaptation." One of the modified beings stepped forward, and Vextani recognized the crystalline structure of a Velnari who had been enhanced with the same technological integration that characterized humanity's evolution. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that belonged to no natural species. "I am Kexthani, formerly third administrator of Kristalla Industrial Complex," the hybrid being announced. "I have chosen to serve humanity's cause because I have seen what humans are capable of creating." Their offer of evolution is preferable to the Council's promise of extinction. Chen gestured to the other modified beings. Each of them represents a different species, a different world, a different industrial specialization. They've helped us understand the galaxy's infrastructure in ways that 3 centuries of external observation never could. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just conquering Council systems, they were converting Council populations, turning the galaxy's own citizens into willing collaborators in their former government's destruction. How many? Vexthany asked, though he dreaded the answer. Millions now, Chen replied casually. The number grows with each system we liberate. It's remarkable how quickly beings embrace evolution when the alternative is the kind of extinction your Council so enthusiastically applied to Earth. She gestured, and the transmission shifted to show massive industrial complexes where human overseers directed converted alien workers in the construction of technologies that defied galactic understanding. Assembly lines where former Council citizens manufactured weapons that could manipulate stars, orbital platforms where hybrid beings processed resources at rates that exceeded anything in the galaxy's history. The Council taught us that survival requires total dedication to a single goal, Chen continued. You devoted centuries to perfecting the art of genocide. We've devoted centuries to perfecting the art of evolution. Her smile widened. Your greatest achievement was teaching us what we needed to become. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in silence that felt like the space between heartbeats before cardiac arrest. Finally, Vexthany spoke. Activate the final protocols. Every being in the chamber turned toward him in shock. The final protocols hadn't been discussed since the Council's formation, represent measures so extreme that their mere consideration had been forbidden for 3 centuries. High Counselor, Admiral Kexval said carefully, the final protocols require unanimous consent from all core species representatives, and the consequences of inaction are extinction, Vexthany interrupted. Human strategy is clear now. They intend to convert our entire civilization or destroy it. They possess technology we cannot match, tactical advantages we cannot counter, and strategic patience we cannot outlast. He activated the chamber's most secure communication system, sending priority signals to every core species homeworld simultaneously. This is High Counselor Vexthany activating Council Emergency Authority. All core species representatives are commanded to attend immediate virtual session for final protocol consideration. Topic: Species Survival Authorization. As connection confirmations arrived from across the galaxy, Vexthany looked at the tactical displays showing humanity's inexorable advance toward the Council's inner worlds. The galaxy's greatest civilization was about to decide whether to surrender everything it had built over millennia or risk everything in a final gamble that might destroy both humanity and the Council together. The War of Extinction was entering its final phase. And for the first time in 3 centuries, the outcome was no longer certain. The Omega device had been conceived during the darkest days of the galaxy's formation, when the first interstellar wars had nearly destroyed civilization itself. Built by the combined efforts of every core species, hidden in the galactic center where even the most sophisticated sensors couldn't detect it, the weapon represented the ultimate expression of Council power. It was designed to sterilize entire sectors of space, reducing stars themselves to cold matter, eliminating all possibility of life across thousands of light years. The Council's founders had sworn it would never be used, that its mere existence would be sufficient to prevent any conflict from escalating to species-ending levels. High Counselor Vexthany stood before the device's activation chamber, his crystalline form reflecting the terrible beauty of the galaxy's most destructive creation. Around him, holographic projections of every core species leader watched with the solemnity of beings preparing to commit an act that would define galactic civilization for millennia to come. The vote is recorded, announced Counselor Prime Yilnara of the Aquatic Federation, her mobility tank casting ripples of bioluminescent sorrow. 7 core species voting to activate, 2 abstaining, 1 dissenting. Final protocol authorization is confirmed. The dissenting vote had come from Counselor Dractos of the Machine Collective, whose artificial intelligence had calculated the probability outcomes and found them universally catastrophic. His final statement before the vote had been characteristically precise. This action will result in the extinction of both human and Council civilizations with 94.7% probability. The remaining 5.3% probability results in galactic sterilization. Recommendation: surrender and negotiate species preservation protocols. His advice had been noted and rejected. High Counselor, Admiral Kexval's voice carried the strain of a being who had devoted his life to military victory and now found himself orchestrating mutual annihilation. Human fleets have entered the galactic core regions. Their advanced elements are less than 6 hours from the inner perimeter. Vexthani nodded, his attention focused on the Omega device's control matrix. The weapon's targeting system showed the entire galaxy laid out in tactical detail, with human-controlled systems marked in crimson. Over 200 star systems now flew human flags, their populations converted or relocated, their resources feeding an enemy that grew stronger with each passing day. They've responded to our final protocol activation exactly as predicted, he observed, studying the human fleet movements. Instead of retreating or attempting negotiation, they're accelerating their advance. It was typical of humanity's evolution, he realized. Faced with extinction, they were moving toward the threat rather than away from it. Their entire species had become weaponized beyond the point where normal survival instincts applied. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human command fleet." On screen, Fleet Commander Sarah Chen appeared in the chamber, but the image was different from her previous communications. She was no longer on a ship's bridge, but standing in what appeared to be the observation deck of a massive space station. Behind her, through transparent aluminum windows, the galactic center spread out in all its terrible beauty. More importantly, she was not alone. Surrounding her were beings from every species in the galaxy, but all of them showed the modifications that indicated conversion to humanity's cause. Velnari with enhanced crystalline structures, Cathari with sharpened features and predatory grace, Thex with technological implants that pulsed with human-designed energy patterns. "High Counselor Vexthani," Chen said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a complex plan reaching its culmination. "We need to discuss the future of galactic civilization." "There is no future," Vexthani replied. "You have 1 hour before the Omega device activates and sterilizes this entire sector. Your advance has brought you within the weapon's effective range. We will all die together." Chen smiled. "That assumes the Omega device will function as designed." The words sent ice through Vexthani's crystalline structure. "Explain." 3 centuries ago, when you eliminated human civilization, you made a critical error. You assumed that humanity's technological development ended with our exile. But we didn't stop learning, High Counselor. We studied everything, every species, every technology, every secret the galaxy possessed. She gestured, and the transmission shifted to show detailed schematics of the Omega device itself. Not external views, but internal blueprints, showing the weapon's most classified components, its construction history, even the quantum signatures of its activation protocols. "Your ancestors built the Omega device using technology from 7 different species," Chen continued. "What they didn't know was that one of those species, the Ethereal Collective, had developed quantum encryption methods that could be compromised given sufficient computational power and time. The Ethereal Collective had been extinct for over 1,000 years, their technology incorporated into the Council's infrastructure so long ago that few beings even remembered their contribution. We've had 3 centuries to break their encryption codes, High Counselor. Did you really think we hadn't found a way to access systems that use their quantum protocols? The implications were beyond catastrophic. If humanity had compromised ethereal encryption, they would have access to virtually every secured system in Council space. Communication networks, defense grids, industrial control systems. The Omega device," Vexthani breathed, "has been under our control for the past 72 hours, Chen confirmed. Every command you've given, every activation protocol you've initiated, every targeting parameter you've set, all of it has been routed through systems we control." Admiral Kexval stepped forward, his tactical displays showing the weapon's status. "Impossible. The device shows full operational readiness. All systems green, activation sequence proceeding normally." "Because we want you to believe that," Chen replied. "The device is indeed fully operational, Admiral. It's simply not under your control anymore." Vexthani stared at the weapon's control matrix, understanding flooding through his consciousness with the weight of absolute defeat. "What do you want?" "What we've always wanted." "What we told you from the beginning." Chen's smile carried 3 centuries of accumulated patience finally reaching its reward. "Justice. Reparations. And accounting for the genocide of our species." She gestured again, and the transmission showed tactical displays that made the Council representatives step backward in unconscious terror. The Omega device's targeting system was indeed active, its world-ending power focused and ready to fire. But instead of targeting human fleet positions, the weapon was aimed at every remaining Council stronghold simultaneously. "The device is designed to sterilize entire sectors," Chen explained, with the casual tone of someone discussing weather patterns. "But with proper modifications, it can be focused to target specific star systems while leaving the surrounding space intact. Your ancestors built a very versatile weapon, High Counselor." The targeting display showed 43 systems marked for destruction, every remaining Council military base, every industrial center that hadn't already fallen to human advance, every population center that still maintained resistance to humanity's liberation campaign. If you activate the device now, you'll destroy everything your civilization has built while leaving human-controlled space completely untouched, Chen continued. Is that really the legacy you want for the Galactic Council? Vexthani looked at the faces of his fellow council members, seeing his own despair reflected in their expressions. Centuries of absolute power had taught them to believe in their technological superiority, their strategic advantages, their inherent right to rule the galaxy. None of it mattered now. What are your terms? He asked finally. Unconditional surrender of all Council military forces. Transfer of administrative control to human oversight committees. Relocation of all Council populations to designated integration centers for processing and conversion. Chen's voice carried the precision of someone who had spent centuries planning this moment. And public acknowledgement that the genocide of Earth was a crime that required appropriate response. And if we refuse, then we activate the Omega device ourselves and accomplish the same objectives without your cooperation. Chen shrugged. The only difference is whether the transition occurs peacefully or through complete annihilation of your resistance. Around the chamber, the Council representatives exchanged glances filled with the knowledge of absolute defeat. Every strategic option had been exhausted, every technological advantage had been countered, every hope of victory had been systematically eliminated by enemies who had evolved beyond their ability to comprehend or resist. You've won, Vexthani said simply. What guarantees do we have that you'll honor any agreements about species preservation? For the first time in their exchanges, Chen's expression showed something that might have been genuine emotion. High Counselor, humanity spent 3 centuries learning what it means to face extinction. We know exactly how precious survival is, how important it is to preserve what can be saved even in the face of absolute loss. She gestured to the converted beings surrounding her. Every species that has chosen integration has been preserved, enhanced, given opportunities to contribute to something greater than what they could achieve alone. We're not interested in genocide, High Counselor. We're interested in evolution. And those who refuse integration are free to establish colonies beyond the galactic rim, just as we did 3 centuries ago. Chen's smile returned, cold as vacuum. Of course, they'll face the same challenges we did: isolation, resource scarcity, the need to develop new technologies and new social structures to survive in hostile environments. The parallel was perfect and terrible. Humanity was offering the Council the same choice the galaxy had given Earth 3 centuries ago: adapt or face extinction. The irony, Chen continued, is that exile might actually benefit those species willing to attempt it. 3 centuries of isolation taught us things about survival, about evolution, about the true nature of technological development that we never could have learned under Council protection. Vexthani looked one final time at the Omega device, at the weapon that represented his civilization's ultimate power and ultimate failure. Then he looked at his fellow Council members, seeing resignation in every face. I, High Counselor Vexthani, speaking for the Galactic Council and all member species, formally surrender all governmental authority to human administration. His voice carried across the galaxy through communication networks that humanity now controlled. May whatever gods watch over us all have mercy on our choices. Chen nodded with the satisfaction of a debt finally collected. The transition will begin immediately. Council military forces will stand down and report to designated processing centers. Civilian populations will remain in place pending integration assessments. Industrial facilities will continue operation under new management. The transmission shifted to show massive human fleets moving through the galaxy's inner systems, not as conquerors but as administrators taking control of assets they already effectively owned. Where the original human evacuation from Earth had been desperate and chaotic, this return was organized with mathematical precision. There is one final thing, Chen added, her voice carrying a note that might have been sympathy. The species that choose exile will be allowed to take copies of all Council historical archives. We want them to remember what happened here, to understand the choices that led to this moment. Why? Vexthani asked. Because 3 centuries from now, when their descendants have evolved beyond anything we can imagine, when they've developed technologies that make our current capabilities seem primitive, when they return to judge us for what we've done to their ancestors, Chen's smile widened. We want them to understand that we learned our lessons well. The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in silence broken only by the soft harmonics of the Omega device powering down under human control. Outside, across the galaxy, The greatest civilization in galactic history was becoming history itself, its billions of citizens beginning the same journey of adaptation and evolution that humanity had traveled 3 centuries before. High Counselor Vexthany looked at the tactical displays showing human ships taking possession of every system, every world, every orbital platform that had once represented Council power. The transition was occurring with the same methodical precision that had characterized humanity's entire campaign. No unnecessary destruction, no pointless cruelty, just the inevitable mathematics of evolution applied to galactic civilization itself. Humanity had indeed returned to claim what the galaxy owed them. And the debt had been paid in full. In the archives of what would become the Human Galactic Administration, scholars would later note that the War of Extinction's conclusion represented the first time in galactic history that a genocide had been answered not with revenge, but with evolution. The galaxy had taught humanity that survival required change. Humanity had taught the galaxy what change truly meant. The lesson was complete.